Hello, and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Your host today is Alina Gorochovsky. Alina is the CEO of SCG Legal and is based in Washington, D.C. Joining Alina is Warren Smith. Warren is the managing partner of Smith Legal Search and is one of the most experienced legal recruiters in Canada and was the past president of the National Association of Legal Search Consultants. He is based in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Warren, thank you for joining us today for this two-part conversation focusing on attorney recruitment and retention. I'm very excited about this. The timing is great. To start with, I'm curious on how COVID has impacted the law firm recruitment model and just the market in general.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Alina, and happy to chat with you a little bit about what's going on in the land of recruitment. Certainly from my perspective, my observation would be that the market has definitely seen an uptick over the last, few months, certainly into 2021. If I'm looking back over the last year, I think that one of the things people haven't always considered is that we did see a period, obviously when COVID first hit back in March, where the market essentially froze in place. If anything, there were, a number of firms did take more aggressive lines and do some layoffs. But I think that sort of 3-4 month period created, frankly, a bit of a backlog. And I think that's partly what has, caused a bit more of the heightened degree of activity in the market that we're seeing here today. But then on top of that, now I think we're layering just an outright increase in activity generally across the board as law firms have adjusted to what the new normal, so to speak, is in the land of legal practitioners.
Great, thank you. I just read that according to the recent Yelp study, associate retention is down to 18%, and 54% of associate departures were, as one would say, unwanted from their law firm's perspective. Can you offer us some insights from the recruiter chair in regard to associate retention? What are law firms doing right? And what should law firms do better?
My recollection is historically, and I remember seeing, because NALP does this periodically in terms of its study of market, I think that the sort of average annual attrition rate has been, sort of in the 18%, sort of 15 to 20% range year over year. And obviously some lawyers move more than once, but 18% retention from associate to partnership. I mean, that.
So I think they were basically noting 4 out of 5 associates leave their firms before becoming partners.
Yeah, that sounds pretty consistent with what I would see in the market as well. I think that, asking the question in terms of over the last year, I think that COVID has probably forced a question upon a lot of people just in terms of, are they enjoying their environment and, is it working out? And there's a lot more what I would describe as geographic fluidity in the market today. I think that we're seeing a lot of firms openly asking the question of, could we hire people? Could we onboard people on a more remote basis? If people are working from their homes, does it matter as much if that home is 50 kilometers or 500 kilometers from the office? And I think that's a question the market is grappling with in real time. But I mean, in terms of the, what is, triggering the attrition, or why is that attrition occurring? I mean, I'm fond of saying people join companies, but they quit bosses, right? And so when people are making a decision to join an organization, it's often with, a view of what is that, going to look like. And there's a lot of, hopeful imagery that they're sort of superimposing upon the pitch and evaluating why they might be joining a firm or a corporation. But the decision to leave is invariably based on, the relationship they have with, commonly it's sort of the 5 or 6 people you work with day in and day out. And I think that one of the great challenges COVID has presented for a lot of organizations is that those binding relationships are much more susceptible to being not maintained or broken if you're not in the office day to day with the people. And I think this is going to be one of the questions that the market's going to be grappling with over the next couple of years, alongside how are we engaging associates at often a very critical time in their careers when they're, doing skills formation, they're getting that core foundation of, becoming a good lawyer, that sort of first 5 years. And for a lot of lawyers, and I think this is probably true of just people generally, the question they're always asking is, who's invested in my career? Who cares about me, in really basic terms? at the firm that I'm working at? And oftentimes that answer is, being creative, because they're literally in the office alongside these people. And, say what you will about the number of hours that lawyers need to put in order to really hone their craft in that first 5, 10, whatever number of years. One of the benefits that the law firm environment does create, for the challenges it has, but one of the benefits it creates, is that you are in these offices alongside these people day in and day out for many hours a day. And it does create a lot of, what I'll call ad hoc mentorship opportunities, right? And I think that's been a piece that I've heard repeatedly has been missing. And so while you can be very productive and certainly working on files and getting good, sort of in the chair, experience on transactions or litigation, oftentimes what binds you is I feel like I've had some really great conversations about, my career, or about really sort of unusual questions of the law that are tangential to the file I'm working on. And those happen, at 7 p.m. when you're taking a break and just, sitting down in the lunchroom, and you end up talking to somebody completely tangential to the work. That gives you a sense that somebody's actually interested in you. Sort of there's a bit of a guards down, more candid conversation. And those aren't happening as regularly in a firm where people are working like we are right now, sort of in offices that are, disconnected. And I think that's a lot of what's caused, the question to be asked more regularly by whether that's associates or partners around, am I happy? Am I enjoying, the work or the firm that I'm in today?
Can you give us sort of advice, right? Beyond sort of being, in the same proximity and asking everyone, how are you doing? What is your career path? What else should partners of law firms be doing to, as you noted, bind those relationships to?
Yeah.
What is the sticky factor, and what can firms sort of do across the firm to enhance that binding factor?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the conversations I've had with firms, and where I'm seeing associates feeling like they are being invested in, the question that I put to the partners is, you may not be as alive to the number of conversations you were having in the course of a week or a month that were anecdotal, ad hoc, spontaneous, but were happening with frequency because you were just simply in the office. That associate who pops their head in the door and says, hey, can I run something by you? Those may have been happening 2-3 times a day, but in aggregate, that's, hours in a month that you're spending investing in your people. And when those aren't happening on a spontaneous basis, the discussion I've had with a lot of my clients is, what can you be doing to potentially script that in? I know a number of partners that have actually just made a point of saying, let's have a check-in once a week with my associate. No script, no agenda, just how are you doing conversation. And even if it's just 15 minutes, just to say anything going on in your world, anything you want to chat about. It's just the sense that it goes back to my earlier comment, is somebody invested in me? Does somebody care about me? And everybody knows that COVID's not the perfect environment to be, sort of running the practice. But I think it's as much as just sort of signaling to the associate, hey, I still care about you. I know we're not working alongside each other in the office day in and day out, but I'm at least making the effort, and I'm doing it on a way that's at least sort of set up in the calendar, because the danger is that associate either doesn't have the confidence or doesn't have the self-awareness to pick up the phone and just sort of have the question or run things by. But if it's put into the calendar, it forms the question for them and it creates that opportunity of engagement. So from what I've seen, it's not a lot. It's just a little bit of, putting that question into their mind. And again, for partners, it's reminding them that there is a power imbalance between the partner and the associate, and the partner is in the alpha. They are the lead person between the two in the relationship. And to an extent, it is incumbent on the partner to drive that relationship building exercise. And so, this is the conversation I have with partners is, you want to keep your associates engaged. Yeah, you can pay them a retention bonus, and yeah, you can give them a pat on the back at the review, but it's a lot more, sort of in the micro decisions. It's the little things. That's what, causes the binding to grow. That's the sense that they're being invested in. So, I think about that if you're not, back in the office yet, and if you're not getting that regular sort of interaction with them, there's a different quality of conversation that occurs when it's unscripted, as opposed to being driven by a file that you're working on or a transaction that's happening in real time.
How about let's focus maybe a little more on partners. I've seen a lot of lateral movements just in the last, 6 months, and obviously January and February tend to be busy, but in June is on track to be a very busy month for recruiters, at least from an external perspective. For partners, what is that binding factor? What are they looking for, and why are some of them staying and some of them leaving? What are their firms doing right and wrong?
I mean, it's interesting because in some ways it's the other side of the coin, and I think this is part of the tension that the firms are grappling with, which is, I mean, my personal observation is that for many partners, freedom, autonomy is the big driver. They want to be in an environment that lets them do what they want to do, right? And what they want to do, varies by individual. But I think that a lot of what they're looking for is, do I have the necessary support? Do I have the necessary resources? And am I in an environment that lets me work with the kind of clients I want on the types of files that I find interesting, right? Partners are invariably very intellectually capable, very intellectually curious, want to be stimulated, want to be engaged in the work that they do. They want to do it with people that they, are enjoying being around. But COVID has created a bit of a curious environment now where am I getting a lot out of the people that I'm working with, and is that part binding me as clearly as it was before? For a number of partners, COVID has opened up a whole new world to them where they've discovered they can actually, work from their summer home seamlessly, something they never really thought about, in the way they've contemplated now, right? And because they're now much more technologically set up to do that than they were a year ago, it's pushing them to think about, how they want to carry their practice on. The tension is that while it may have afforded them some great personal freedoms, there may be some long-term costs back to the firm, going back to associate engagement, associate retention, and this schism that is emerging in firms. And I've had this conversation with the partners that are going into the office that have, voiced some real frustration to say, well, I'm one of the, 20 partners that's going in every day. And, all of my other partners are now off doing whatever they want to do. And I'm the guy that's fielding all the associate questions because I'm the person that's here, or I'm the person that's being asked to, be present to, to help, shuttle some documents or, sign some things for the firm because, I'm the only guy from the exec committee that's actually in every day. And that's leading to some frustration. So, I would say as from a firm perspective, be aware that, for those that are exercising peak autonomy, they may be enjoying that, but is there a cost to those that are, sort of feeling like they're shouldering an unfair amount of the burden of administering and running the firm, right? So I think there's a very clear conversation you want to have at the firm, and you got to be really honest, amongst the partners. Does everybody feel this is, a fair distribution of, the non-billing component of the firm, right? And I would say that's just like that's a truism that's probably true in every business everywhere in the world. It's communication, 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 right? And it's, the challenge I find with lawyers, and I'm sure every one of the firms that are, in the group will appreciate, lawyers are great at, sort of communication at a surface level. It's the much more sort of brutally honest, be really honest with each other as partners, not in a hurtful way, but in a, look, you got to be clear about what you're actually struggling with each other. And you've got to create an environment that permits that conversation to happen. And to be honest, this is to me one of the challenges that the sort of the Zoom law firm doesn't address as well, right? The picking up on the body language, picking up on the cues, really getting into it. There's only so far people are going to go when we're sitting around a video conference with 20 little boxes, on a screen. And there's a reason why, I think firms do operate and require a certain amount of face-to-face to be able to, sort of work through these kinds of issues. So yeah, I would say for any of the firms, I think you do want to be in a room together. I think you do want to ask these kind of questions. I think you want to have a real honest discussion around how important and how valuable is that autonomy piece versus how important is creating the binding agents, creating the collegiality, and having the tough discussions, that allow you to move forward as a group, because it's going to be front and center as the world comes out of COVID. I mean, here in Canada, we're a few months behind the States, but I'm very confident these are questions that, my Canadian clients are grappling with right now. And, I'm sure, for the American firm clients, this is a question they're going to be dealing with over the summer.
So if now that the firms are beginning to look at and plan for going back to the office or hybrid models, what are your recommendations? What should they be doing as far as finding that level of compromise where they're still collaborating, in real time, live in the office, or having that autonomy? I know that there's some friction between clients. Clients, apparently, a lot of industries would like their law firms to be back in the office.
Yeah,
But I know that there's that friction of still having some hybrid workforce environment. So, what
for
would be
sure.
your recommendations coming out? If a law firm was to come out strong, get people back in the office, what should they be doing? Well, team building, any type of activities that kind of encourage people to both be in the office and be happy about being back in the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, the firm has to make a clear decision on what's the position they're going to adopt post COVID. So I think there is a firm wide discussion, and this is incumbent on the leadership of the firm to, really understand what's the best lane for the firm. I have had conversations with our corporate clients, when we're doing recruitment for general counsel or legal departments. And a lot of those discussions mirror your comment there that there is a bit of a concern that the corporate clients have raised around what does the virtual law firm mean to us as the client. And concerns around, sometimes it's little things. It's, I've had conversations with GCs around, they've noticed that things that would have happened in the past at a law firm more on what I would call an ad hoc basis. You're the corporate commercial client and there's a real estate question that comes up and it's not at the point where you need to bring in, the real estate practitioners to actually deal with, but it's a tangential issue related to a larger corporate. And you might just sort of pop your head into your real estate part and say, hey, what do you think about this? And it might be just a 2-minute quick sort of kind of run this by you. But now the challenge is that question, if it, sort of is on the line, leads to a call and it becomes a scheduled call because you're not in the office with each other. And guess what happens? If it's scheduled, it gets recorded. And now all of a sudden what might have not been, and maybe it should have been Bill, but it wasn't. And now it turns into a 0.2 on both sides. And just like that, the client has just added an extra 0.5 to 0.6 or an hour to the bill. And if that happens a couple of times in the month, it adds up. And so that's a question that, we're hearing clients, grumble a little bit about. The other question they're grumbling about is how is the training, how is the development coming for the associates? Because again, if the associate is off in their home trying to toiling away, are they being as managed? Are they being as efficient? Are they getting the skills development? And and I'm sure your clients hear this all the time, or your firms hear this all the time. The clients don't want to be sort of inadvertently paying for all the training. They want to know that one of the benefits of retaining a large firm is that the firm is going to be able to do some of that, for them, because that's why they pay the premium for the quality of advice they receive. And again, it's not so much that firms can't figure out, how to manage that question or how to manage associate development, whether it's in a virtual or not. But it's clear to me that it's not been clearly communicated consistently by the firms to their clients. So again, it's understand how you're going to address this and then have a clear plan to communicate it back. And it's the same thing, in my view, on how is the firm going to be operating post-COVID. So if the firm says, you know what, and I've heard a lot of sort of 60% as being the number that's being bandied around about sort of 3 days in the office and 2 days remote, is that sort of the new normal? We'll see. But again, I think that whatever the decision the firm lands on that question, it's going to be very clear or very important to the firms to communicate that clearly back to the associates, to the staff, and to the partners, right? And it's people need to understand why they're doing it. Otherwise, those that want to be back in the office all the time are going to be cranky, and those that want to be working remotely all the time are going to be cranky. So again, it's clear communication. People want to understand the why, right? And I think that if that's the focus of the partner meetings over the next 2 months, as you prep for what I assume is going to be sort of a fall reentry, you've got that clear communication nailed down. You've got the buy-in from the partners. We understand why we're doing this. That's, to me, that's the incumbency on the leadership to have that clear narrative. And from there, you will find, your people will fall into that. They will either say, yep, I want to be in that kind of a firm. I want to be in a firm where we're back in the office 100% of the time, if that's where you land. And that will attract some people to the firm as well, right? It'll cause some people to leave. But again, it's be clear about where you are in the market. And that should be your true north. And that should bind, hopefully the most number of people to the firm, but also become a differentiating feature on how you might bring more people into the firm as well.
And that concludes part 1. Please continue on to part 2.